Greetings, this video is for both new users and previous users of my Excel-Checkbook spreadsheet for Microsoft Excel. It will be a complete walkthrough of the features along with how to use it. There will be different sections you can jump to which will be outlined in the YouTube description. New for 2025. Data entry of transactions is improved. There are now convenient drop-down options for date, transaction type, and you can also customize a list of frequent transaction entries, which will also pre-select the category when you choose it. By way of a quick example, I'll put in an entry for a recent date. I can designate again the transaction type from this drop-down list, fully customizable. Also within the payee description box, you can choose a pre-selected choice, again fully customizable, and I'll go ahead and put in an option here for Walmart, and then I'll key in a dollar amount. And you can see that from this pre-selected payee description, it automatically defaulted to a particular subcategory. A few minor visual changes have also been made to the checkbook registers. You'll see, for example, that this column is now called payee/description, and then the columns for withdrawal and deposit have been modified slightly so that they're more appropriate whether it's a credit card or a bank account. The balance column is better visualized with some left and right lines, and then category and type are also in a different color font just to help designate that those are lookup and automatically populate based on your choice from the subcategory field. Also new for 2025, if you put in entries that will be in the future, for example for budgeting forecasting purposes, the top of the spreadsheet now shows a distinction between today's balance versus the future balance. And another small visual change is that if you do any filtering on expenses, for example, you could do so from this category dropdown, picking a particular option, or you can also do a right click, and I'll right click on this food drink option, and from the pop-up menu I'll choose filter to filter on the selected sales value. You'll see at the top that it'll then show a sum of those filter expenses, and then I'll just go back to this button to clear out that filtering option. I'll cover all of that in greater detail throughout the video. Also new for 2025 is a slightly revised list of the default categories. When you click on the subcategory choice, you'll see the choices have been put into buckets, for example, charity gift choices, discretionary choices, food, drink, health, medical, living, housing, etc. All of these are fully customizable by you, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. Also new for 2025, building off of the previous dashboard report to see your expenses and income by category, there's also now a new tab that provides a basic printable report of your income and expenses. Also, for those who have made use of the future transaction sheet, which is a handy feature for easily populating recurring expenses or income to your checkbook, this has been enhanced to now fully support paychecks or deposits to your register. So if you have a common or recurring paycheck, you can now designate those in this future transactions list, indicate that it is a deposit by indicating this in this column. And also new is the ability to group these, for example, group A, group B, C, etc. And the idea here is that maybe you have particular recurring expenses or deposits that happen early in the month, and you might put those as group A, versus expenses and income that happen later in the month, which you might, for example, designate as group B. When you go to click the button to post those, a pop-up screen will ask you which group you'd like to have post to your register. In this video, we'll do a deep dive on this functionality later on. And the last highlighted change that I'll make is that there's now a worksheet or a tab called Settings. Under the Settings tab is where you'll find the categories list has been shifted to this area. And you also have this table here for customizing your frequently used payees list, which again is available to you in the drop-down as you go to enter in your transactions. All right, we'll get started with this walkthrough by demonstrating some sample entry of transactions, expenses, and income. Before we look at entering a few sample transactions, let's look at the columns and headings of the register worksheet. This spreadsheet supports up to 6 registers. You might use them for checking accounts, savings accounts, or for credit cards that you frequently charge items to. One of the first things you'll probably want to do is give these registers a more meaningful name. So for example, maybe in this first register, I like to call that my main checking account. So if I do a right click on that tab down there, I can choose the option to rename and then type in a more meaningful name. I'll call this one main checking and then press the enter key. Perhaps my second register, I'll do a right click and choose rename. Perhaps this one is a joint checking account, so I'll type in joint, press enter. And maybe the third will be a credit card, for example. Maybe I make frequent use of a Discover credit card. All right, we'll come back to this first register that I've renamed main checking. We have column headings for date, transaction type, check number, the payee description, withdrawal amount, deposit amount, and then the balance is a formula where it's automatically calculating that for us. Then we have a column for reconciliation. We'll talk about that in greater detail later. And a column for subcategory, category, and type. And lastly, there's an optional memo field if you'd like to just have some additional detail related to the transaction. Now I'll demonstrate putting in a sample entry. Now, so I'll click into the date field, and I could just manually type in a date, for example, 12/4/2024. If it's a recent entry, you can click on the drop-down and then make use of the drop-down date selection. So I'll go ahead and choose a date here. And then next, again, if I'd like to designate a transaction type, I can, certainly not required. And let's say that I visited PetSmart for some pet food. So I can click with my mouse, use my arrow keys to move around, and let's say that my transaction was for $56.25. And then here in my subcategory, we can click and look in the list, see if we have an appropriate choice that we like. So here we have an option for pet food. After choosing pet food, it does automatically then populate the broader category and type columns. Now before moving on, let's talk about customizing your subcategory list. If we visit the sheet called the Settings tab, here you'll find the Categories list for drop-down. We'll scroll over here to the right a little bit more and scroll down. Again, this list is fully customizable. You're welcome to change the text, delete entries, insert entries. Typically in Excel, you'll have buttons up here for deleting and inserting. So for example, if I were to click on this insert drop-down right there, I have an option to insert a table row above. So if I click on that, it does give me a new blank row, so I can put in a new choice. Conversely, I could click on the delete button and delete a row. So again, very easy to customize your categories list. Let's go back to main checking. Now, one of the things that I personally like to do in my own checking account is to put in some future expenses that I know will be coming up perhaps later in the month. And, I could put those further down in the register, skipping multiple blank rows if I would like. So, for example, let's say that I know that I have a future car payment later in the month. So I'll put in a date and put in an entry for, let's say, my car loans amount. Click into the withdrawal column and put in whatever that amount might be. And then I'll go ahead and also put in my subcategory to go with that. So if I look through my list, I will find that I have a section here for transportation. Now I went ahead and added an additional sample entry because I wanted to point out here at the top of the screen, it will show you today's balance, knowing what today's date is, versus the future balance. And so because I have a couple entries that are in the future, it's showing me that my future balance is going to be a lesser amount than what I currently have in the account. Now, as you go to enter in transactions and expenses that you might have, if you find that you accidentally skipped an entry and maybe you want to insert it in between some other additional entries, I have a couple different ways of doing that. Let's say, for example, that I had another entry that happened on October 3rd. A couple different ways I can insert an entry. If I have my cursor somewhere on this row, I can visit the insert button right there. Just a single click of insert will give me a new blank row. Conversely, I can also point at a row number and do a right click and choose insert to also get a new blank row in that way. So both those options work for inserting some rows. You can also do the same thing for delete. So if I right click on a row number, I can also find the delete choice from that right click menu. Or similarly, if I have my cursor selection in a particular row, I can also make use of the delete button that's in the ribbon bar. Now, as you get your transactions into your checkbook register, there are times that maybe you're curious about a dollar amount that you spent within a particular category or subcategory. So Microsoft Excel offers a feature that they call filtering. So under each column heading, you have a little drop-down button where you can select from different filters. By default, we are seeing all of the entries in the checkbook, but if I were to check the select all, it now has unchecked all these options. And let's say, for example, that I'm curious about my auto gas expenditures. So if I check mark that, click OK, I'm now seeing just the entries for auto gas. Now I can tell that I have a filter activated because this column indicator is showing me a filter icon, and also these line numbers are now blue in color. Now I'm going to clear my filter and go back to the drop down and tell it to clear the filter so that I'm back to seeing all of my entries. And as one more quick example of filtering, this time I'm going to point at this word transportation and do a right click with my mouse. And there's an option under the filter screen here for filter by selected cells value. And after doing so, again, I see that my row numbers are blue in color, and I see that lines numbers appear to be skipped, and that's because I have a filter in place. I also see a sum of the filtered expenses over $1,400, and I'll click on this icon or this button here to clear my filter, so I'm back to seeing all of my rows. Okay, while talking about entering transactions, let's look at the sheet called Future Transactions. So we'll click on that tab here at the bottom of the screen. And this is a totally optional feature that you may want to take advantage of. And the idea is that if you have some expenses, income that are common and recurring, and you'd like to just be able to click a single button and have those quickly add to your register, you can do so. All right, well, we'll talk through the sample entries that are here, but of course you'll probably want to just erase these entries and populate this with your own. But here we have, for example, a entry for a paycheck in the amount of $1,600. This is a deposit rather than an expense, so I had to indicate a Y for yes. We have a column here for what day of the month is this typically going to appear in my checkbook. So I'm saying that this is going to appear usually the first day of the month. And when I click this button, would I like this entry to skip some blank rows before it posts to the bottom of my register? So this is indicating, yeah, I'd like to skip 5 blank lines or 5 blank rows before this entry appears. Okay, and then for each of these entries, I can also go ahead and designate the subcategory. So we'll click on this list here and make sure that we've got the correct option that's there. And I do see that I need to correct my worksheet because I renamed my worksheet. So I'm going to click in this drop down and make sure that this is correctly noting that this needs to go into the main checking register. Okay, we'll also make this correction for the other entries as well. Now I'll demonstrate the use of this here in just a moment, but before doing so, let me talk about the designation of a group letter, group A, B, C, or D. Now one option would be that I could just have all of these be the same group letter, group A. And what happens when you go to click on this button for post them, you'll have a little dialog box that pops up asking, well, which group would I like to post to my register? And if all of my entries are the same group letter, let's say group A, and I tell it to go ahead and post those, it will put all of these entries into the bottom of my main checking register sheet, or whichever worksheet has been designated. But what you might prefer is if you have recurring transactions that happen early in the month, you might want to put those in a group A versus your recurring expenses that occur later in the month. Maybe you want to put that in a group B or a group C. That way you can designate when clicking this button which of these entries you want to go ahead and populate into your registry. So I'll go ahead and click on my group A as a quick sample. Okay, so after clicking that button, I'll go visit my main checking screen, and I see that it did correctly put those entries into the register, often skipping blank rows as I might have designated within that future transaction worksheet. Before we move on from discussing entry of transactions, I do want to talk about the choice of using a register for one of your credit cards versus using the sheet that's called card debt, which is great for just tracking the progress of paying off a credit card that maybe you've stopped using. So let's say, though, that you decide that you want to put your credit card transactions for a credit card you routinely use. So here I've renamed one of my register sheets, called it Discover Card, and have some example transactions in here. Now, I do note that it's showing a negative balance, and also when I put in my starting balance, I actually put that in with a negative number, since this is a liability sort of an account rather than an asset account. Now, with that in mind, I do want to make mention that you may want to visit the settings sheet, and for this register that I renamed Discover Card, I actually am going to change that from being an asset to a liability account. Now, the only thing that actually does is that it just shows the number now here at the top as a positive number rather than a negative, mostly just for aesthetic reasons. It's not actually altering any real values. But that does reflect how I might typically look at my credit card statement on the website. It's showing me how much I still owe that credit card. So using one of the register sheets for a frequently used credit card is a great thing, because of course then you can also do your categorization and see that tracked and charted. However, if you have some credit cards that you have stopped using and you have a goal of paying those off, you might want to make use of the sheet called Card Debt. Now, the idea behind this card debt worksheet is that you have a personal loan or credit card. You've stopped using that particular card, but you would just like to visually track your progress of paying it off. So you can designate the name of that bank or credit card, what your current balance is, what your initial debt, or maybe what the highest amount of debt that you had on that particular credit card. And then you have a date column here to designate, when's the last time that you visited this and updated that balance amount. So let's say, for example, that I have a Citibank card I've stopped using, but I am tracking my progress of paying it off. And so here on a current date, I know that I'm now down to $564.35 for my balance. So as I update that, I'll just see that visual indication in a bar graph of my progress of paying off that particular credit card. Okay, next we'll talk about reconciliation of your checking account or savings accounts. When you get your monthly bank statement, if you would like to go through a reconciliation process, you can do so. So for each register worksheet, you'll see a button here at the top for Reconcile on Off. So when we click on that button, we can now start to go through a reconciliation process. So here on the screen, you'll see a link to click to visit the Reconcile settings screen, which is the orange tab here at the bottom. I could click that, or I could click on the hyperlink to do that. Now I'm wanting to reconcile my main checking account, so that you'll be reflected here in this particular row. And I would need to look at my bank statement and see what the dates are of the statement. So let's say, for example, that my bank statement has a date of September 1, and the closing date of the statement is, let's say, 9/30. So after keying in those dates, I would next refer to the statement to see what dollar amounts my statement indicates are in checks versus just other withdrawals and deposits and credits. So here, these numbers here were from previous entries. I'm just going to delete those. The reconcile screen is telling me that within this date range that I put in, it's already found that there are checks in the amount of $319, other withdrawals of over $1,400, deposits of $1,275. And if when I look at my bank statement, I see these same exact numbers, well, I'm probably already in sync. But if I'd like to, I certainly could just key in from my bank statement that yes, my bank statement says there were $319.28, and the other withdrawals totaled 1,114.61, and that deposits and credits totaled $1,275. And after keying those in, it certainly does give me an indication that those totals match. But let's say that instead I have a mismatch. My statement indicated that the withdrawals totaled this dollar amount, but within my own checking account, it's got a different amount found. So here's what I would do. I'd go back to my main checking account, and within the date range that I'm working in, which happens to be the month of September, I would just start to review each transaction in my register sheet here versus what my bank statement indicates. And we have a column here to designate, have I reconciled that particular amount? So we have a drop down here to click for R to say that yes, I've reconciled it, versus C, meaning it's cleared the bank. And also an option here for split in case you want to just put separate entries in your spreadsheet to total up the amount you charged. That's just a way to visually indicate that. But I can look through my entries, check those, and as I keying in my reconciliation, you'll notice that the status up the top screen is updating. Now perhaps I find that I had miskeyed my entry for the ABC store. That instead of $17.90, it was actually $47.90. So after updating that or correcting that entry, if I now go back and revisit the reconcile screen, I see that now everything is a match. So, again, that's just a quick way of doing a reconciliation for your bank account. And if I do want to complete the process of just marking my transactions, when I get here to the last one and represent that it's been reconciled, now my withdrawals and deposits have all been cleared, and I can now turn off this reconcile mode. Next, we'll take a look at the dashboard and reports area of the spreadsheet. So click on this purple worksheet called Dashboard. And on your first visit, you may need to click on the green Refresh Charts button to make sure that the charts have been updated based on all of your most recent entries. This dashboard will automatically know whether you have entries in particular register worksheets, how many years of entries you might have, what months have entries in them as well, and also which categories have been designated for your transactions. So based on everything that's in this sample spreadsheet, I see that I have a grand total of withdrawals and deposits, and also a designation of those withdrawals and deposits by month. And if I scroll down the screen here, we also see top 5 expenses by category, expenses over $1,000, and then also a breakdown of top 15 expenses by subcategory. This dashboard screen features some buttons that are filtering buttons. Excel likes to call these slicer controls. So for example, let's say that I just wanted to focus on my bank account that I've called the main checking account. So I can click on that button, and now the chart represents just the entries in that main register called main checking. Similarly, if I was curious just to look at a particular month, I can click on, let's say, the month of September and just focus on the categorization of expenses and deposits for the month of September. And anytime you click on these buttons, you will see that there's a designation to indicate that a filter is in effect, and there's a little button here to clear that filter. So we clear the filter. We're back to seeing all the months for the main checking. And if I clear this filter, I'm now back to seeing both registers. Now the dashboard will certainly support many years of transactions. So here's a sample of a spreadsheet that has 5 years of entries for 2020 through 2024, along with the different register names and different categories as well. So let's say, for example, I could click on the year 2023, see the charts update for that, and then maybe I wanted to focus on just the food and drink category. So I can click on that and see how that would update with the charts. Next, we'll take a look at the worksheet called Reports, which provides a categorization of your income and expenses in a more table-like fashion that would be something you could certainly print. This screen features similar buttons for filtering. So for example, if I wanted to focus my attention on just a particular bank account, a particular register, I could click on that and see the numbers update based on that choice. Okay, with these slicer controls, if I clear the filter and choose, let's say, a different entry, but maybe also want to combine it with another, the slicer controls feature a multi-select, so if I activate that, then I can also choose an additional register and have it focus on just those two. Or go back to the clear filter to see everything. Okay, on the screen you have a filter choice here at the top for which year you'd like to focus on. So based on what entries you've got in your spreadsheet, you may see different years or date ranges in there. So for example, I could click on 2023, click OK, and then see the expense report update for that. And before we finish up, just a few notes regarding customization, changes to the checkbook spreadsheet that you may or may not want to make. And first, I need to give a few warnings. Please do not change the column headings. If you do, it will actually break the dashboard and report. So it's best to leave the column headings as they are. Also, if you find that you don't need this many registers, don't delete them. If you do, again, it'll cause an issue in the dashboard and reports. You can, however, click, hold down, and drag these to a different location in the spreadsheet if you just don't want to see them. Also, don't delete any of the columns in the spreadsheet. Now, if you, let's say, for example, have no interest in seeing the memo column, don't delete it, but you certainly could hide it. So if I point at the L column, do a right click, Excel does offer the choice to hide a column, so that's certainly an option. The customizations that you can do, if we go visit the settings worksheet, I'll mention again that you can certainly customize the transaction types. These transaction types do show up when you go to enter your transactions here in this drop-down list. You can make total changes to the categories list. Currently, the category types are just limited to expense and income. Categories are currently there's charity, discretionary, food, drink, health, etc. Certainly you can make changes to those, to all the subcategory choices. And then you also have the frequently used payees list. Let's say, for example, that I wanted to add Target as a choice. Maybe also I wanted to add Best Buy as another choice. I don't have to put in a subcategory for those, but I certainly can if I want to. Now, you may want this list to be alphabetized. After putting in those entries, for example, if I go revisit the main checking account and click in the little drop down here, I'll see that these are right here at the bottom rather than being in an alphabetical order. So what you may want to do is if you do add entries to the frequently used list, you might want to tell Excel to sort these in ascending order. A couple different ways to do that. If I just do a right click in this list and go look for the right click menu for sort, tell to sort A to Z, that will resort it alphabetically. And now when I go back to visit the list here in one of the register sheets, I will see that it is in alphabetical order. All right, I hope this walkthrough has been helpful to you, and I hope you excel in your finances.